There are a lot of people who think Pilate was just a jerk, that he was a petty functionary of the Roman government, and that he just tried to cover his backside. And maybe he was. And there is this other possibility that maybe he was in as difficult a spot ethically and morally as anybody is ever going to find themselves in. And one of his, it's really just one sentence. It's a question that he asked Jesus, is perhaps the most famous quote of Pilate, where he said, "What is truth?" You know, there in our world, it would be, I think, it's quite a tendency. And when I say that, that's not really the way I want to say it. I think it is. It's easy for me. I don't know about you, but sometimes I have that question: what's truth? I mean, number one, the data we're getting in order to draw a conclusion about what is truth is so limited and flawed. How am I supposed to know what's true? It feels like the truth shifts and changes from one news cycle to the next. And I don't care what news outlet you're watching or listening to. Here's the thing. We got to make sure we separate truth from the news, because they are often not the same thing. Okay. I think, and of course, I just, I get to tell you what I think. I think Americans of any political or religious persuasion, regardless of your ethnicity or your background, regardless of your educational achievements or lack of, regardless of your economic standing, every American needs to learn how to think toward the truth, to orient themselves toward truth. That's an interesting phrase that I was introduced to by my friend Bob Baker in California. His concept of a mature Christian, a mature individual, has to do with they are able to and they choose to consistently orient themselves toward the truth. Well, basically what that means is, first of all, discern the truth. Sometimes truth is discovered, but really, more often, I think it is a matter of discerning it, seeing it, accepting it as whatever the truth is, that's what I want to accept. Okay. Now, if I'm going to orient myself toward the truth, basically what it means is truth becomes my grid, and my life then gets arranged around what I understand to be true. Don't mistake this for my truth. There is no such thing. There is only my understanding or my perception of the truth. But that doesn't alter the truth. And our world is in a heap of trouble because we haven't figured out that there is this difference between my perception of the truth and the truth. You already know, I'm a pessimist, socially and sociologically, culturally. I try to be realistic, and theologically, I am conservative. But I look at what this big, it's like a smorgasbord of available options for the truth. in our world today. My thing is, here's why I'm talking about all this. It's from 1 Timothy 6, verse 20. Timothy, guard what has been entrusted to your care. Turn away from godless chatter and the opposing ideas of what is falsely called knowledge. And that, I believe, the synonym for that is truth. If it's falsely called knowledge, then I think what he's saying is the ultimate, most important knowledge is knowledge of the truth. So that got me, all cranked up about truth. I just see so much counterfeit in the world around me. I see it in, it's really so easy to just throw rocks. I mean, sling big ones at mainstream media for me, because they don't represent my perspective on truth. And I'm on the other side of the fence politically from what I judge their political views and whatever. But anyway, here's where I'm going with that. It just seems like there's just tons of counterfeit information out there. I heard this years ago, so I don't know how to verify if it still occurs. I do know this much, though. This would have been 30 years ago when a person was hired by a bank and they were going to be a teller. For the first several days, have I told you this? If I've told you this, then pretend like this is the first time you're hearing it. But for the first several days, they just are counting money, bills in a room. They're not making any decisions. They're not making change. They're just counting. These are all authentic, reliable bills. Okay. Well, then along about the fourth, fifth day, their supervisors throw in a counterfeit bill. Here's what I'm told happened. They would move, and when they came to the counterfeit bill, they knew it. And the reason they knew it is because it didn't feel like the authentic bill. To be able to identify the counterfeit, you've got to know the authentic. Christian brother and sister, we have got to spend, I think, this is my opinion, I think we need to spend less time on making a catalog of all the counterfeit that we see around us and more time identifying the authentic truth. You can disagree or agree. The odds are favorable. We're still going to see each other in heaven. But I do truly believe that if you spend your time identifying the truth, the counterfeit will be obvious when it appears. Now here's, I think, I'm growing to believe that this is a huge thing for all of us. It has to do with neurology. I've talked, I think, before about the concept of neuroplasticity, which means your brain is flexible, plastic in that sense. Plasticity means it can be changed. Well, here's what I see. Every thought, I'm told, travels as an electric impulse along a neural pathway. It doesn't sound very Bible study oriented, but stay with me. Every thought travels as an electronic impulse on a neural pathway. And a neural pathway this is very symbolic, but it's like a highway of information. No, it's not a highway of information. It's a highway for information. Okay. The more often that thought is thunk, the deeper the neural pathway becomes, the deeper and wider. The more it is traveled, the more entrenched it becomes. Okay. The opposite is also true. If a neuropathway, if a thought is thunk less, that neuropathway becomes weaker. Why does that matter to the truth? Big time. Here's why. If you focus on the counterfeit and you're thinking often about the counterfeit, that's where your focus is. And your focus will determine what neuropathways are going to be engaged and activated. The more you think about the counterfeit, the more deeply entrenched, the more powerful that neuropathway becomes. Eventually, for these deeply entrenched, powerful neuropathways, they will hold our focus captive. It can become the entire focus of our intention because that neuropathway has become so powerful. I'm saying, as believers, as thinking individuals, if we turn our focus from the counterfeit, knowing that the counterfeit is there, and what makes us able to identify the counterfeit, remember, is knowing what is true. And the more I focus on what is true, guess what happens to that neural pathway? It becomes stronger, more deeply entrenched. And by focusing on the truth, I am letting this other neural pathway, which deals with the counterfeit, to become less powerful. And here's why that matters. If I'm all locked up about the counterfeit and my focus is there, this is just my opinion, but I think both biblical thought and neurology support the idea that that's going to become a consuming thought. I'd rather be consumed with the thought of truth. What it looks like, what it feels like, what it smells like. I have a good friend, Kevin Oder. He's a blessing in my life, has been since I first met him. And he's not perfect, but man, he is a Sharpie. And one of the things, he was the senior pastor at Canyon Ridge Christian Church in Las Vegas while Debbie and I were there. And periodically at our monthly all-staff meetings, he would address the moral issue of, and the target we have painted on our chest as pastors and workers in the church, that we have to consider our behaviors because there's a lot at stake. And I'm not just talking about our reputation or embarrassment factors. I'm talking about people who view us as a model for following Christ. And one of the things that he said, my behavior has to pass the sniff test. Well, you know what that means. If it smells like poo, it's poo. And there are times when the truth has got to pass the sniff test. If it smells like poo, it's not truth. Well, so if you're going to go on a campaign, if you're serious about identifying the truth, where do you go? Where do you go? Well, for us, we go to Scripture. Okay. Press the stop button here and come back to this next time, because we really need to talk about how do you find truth in the Scripture. And I'll give you my perspective, which honestly, I've got to be honest to say, I don't think I've got the best ideas, but I've got some ideas. I'll share them with you next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.